So the first one of these is relatively obvious. It's focus. We are focusing our mind. We're focusing our mind on the breathing. So pretty straightforward. Focus your mind on the breathing, get distracted, bring it back. And on one hand, that's what's going on. But I think there's a bit more going on than that. So when I was young, and this is one of those, I'm an old fart, and these are the days of yore about how things used to be back in the day. But when I was growing up, we had these sort of old-fashioned cameras that you actually had to focus. It had a little knob on the front, and you would focus it. It's called an SLR, and you'd focus it, and you'd try and focus it on exactly the subject that you were trying to get a photograph of. And it was very difficult because it's very difficult to see through this tiny little viewfinder that you had if that thing was exactly in focus. But the cameras used to have this cool little device. There was a little circle in the middle of the viewfinder that you could sort of see. It didn't show up on the photograph, but you could see it as you were looking through the viewfinder. And there was a little circle, and it had a line halfway down the circle. And when the thing that you was pointing that circle at was in focus, it all looked good. But when it was out of focus, either the top half would be dark and the bottom half would be light, or it was a way of basically telling you if what you were looking at was exactly where the focus was. And this is, I think it's called depth of field. So these cameras had a very narrow depth of field. It was only focused, depending on how you turn the knob, it would be focused at a specific distance. And then you'd hope it was in focus, you'd take the photograph, and then unfortunately we had to wait weeks to get the photographs back from the developer, and then you'd find out whether it was in focus or not, and you might go, oh my God, it was going to be such a good photo, but it was out of focus. And nowadays, if you're young, you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, unless you have one of these digital SLRs and you know what I'm talking about. But most cameras now, most people are using their phone as their camera, and the camera is set and the phone is set up so that basically everything is in focus all the time. It's what's known as a very wide or deep field of focus, depth of field, very wide depth of field. So that everything, something close up, something in the middle distance, and even something in the distance, everything's in focus. That's cool. You don't have to worry about whether it's in focus anymore. Everything's in focus. It's great. But Apple and Google and all the other phone manufacturers have noticed that actually there's something kind of cool about being able to just focus on one thing. So in the latest editions of the phone, they've built in this mode. In Apple, it's called portrait mode, whereby if something's relatively close to you, you can tell it, okay, I want to take this in portrait mode, and it'll put that in focus. And then everything else is going to go blurry and out of focus. And it's pretty cool, and people like it because it kind of photograph looks really neat, but it also brings your attention very specifically to the thing that's in focus. If everything's in focus in a photograph, your mind can focus on everything on the photograph. You can look at anything. But if there's only one thing in focus, then that's what draws your attention. You're drawn to the thing that's in focus. And I think that meditation is a little bit like portrait mode on a phone, or like the old-fashioned cameras. We are choosing to have a very shallow depth of field. So we are choosing to just focus on one thing, just on the breathing. You can even narrow down the focus even more tightly and just focus perhaps on the sensation as it enters the nostrils, right at the beginning of the nostrils. Or if you're breathing in through your mouth, just notice simply the sensation just on your lips. You can do that right now. Just notice, really get very specific in your focus to just notice right as the air enters. Just notice that sensation. And in that, we're really narrowing down, getting very specific about what's in focus. And what that allows us to do is to notice. when that piece is no longer in focus. So we're focused very specifically, very narrowly on the breathing. But then the mind focuses somewhere else and it drags us away and we focus somewhere else. But we know that we've lost focus because we were focused in one very specific place and now we've lost that focus. Now this kind of meditation is often known as mindfulness meditation. Traditionally though, these are known as concentration exercises. So this meditation where we focus on the breathing, and then variations on it where we might focus on the sensations of the body, we might focus on a piece of music, on a candle flame, on a specific type of picture. They're known as concentration exercises. And I get it, and there's a reason for that, and that is your concentration is going to improve. You do these exercises, your concentration is going to improve. And if you want to do some of the more advanced aspects of meditation, which most people, to be honest, don't, but if you did, you really do have to develop your concentration. At some point, your concentration does have to get better. Now, I know most people just want to feel a bit better, and so that's not so relevant, but that's why they're called concentration exercises. They're the preliminary exercises, and you need to do them in order to be able to really get some of the deeper insights into your mind and present moment awareness and stuff like that. But for most of what you want out of meditation, you don't worry too much about that. Your concentration will develop. I prefer to refer to this as awareness meditation. And I prefer to focus on the building block as focus. And the reason being is that we're using this awareness of our focus. We're placing our attention and our focus in a very specific place. And then we notice when we've lost it. We become aware of where our focus is from moment to moment. And I think that's huge. It's like this game we're playing whereby we place our focus and then we notice focus has gone somewhere else. And then I say, okay, bring your focus back, refocus, and then you lose your focus. And we're developing an awareness of where is my focus from moment to moment. And I know you get lost and your mind takes you somewhere and it's gone. And for a while, it might be gone for a while. But there's that critical moment where you become aware of where your mind is. And that's why it's so important, because you're becoming aware of where your focus is. And you can't, they call them concentration exercises, but you can't really work on concentration, or I don't understand how you can't just concentrate by going, oh, okay, I'm going to concentrate harder. Doesn't work. We know that from meditation. You can sort of say, okay, concentrate on your breathing. What happens? Your mind goes elsewhere. And if you just try harder, if you just concentrate harder, you're just going to get frustrated and probably constipated because it doesn't work. You're just going to get annoyed with yourself. Your mind is going to wander, and the more you resist it, the more it's going to happen. But if you can see the game as being placing your focus somewhere and then becoming more sensitive to noticing where your focus has gone, that you can work on. That is actually how your concentration improves, is by becoming more aware from moment to moment, where is your mind? And this is huge in your life. And I'm going to talk a lot more about this in the second half, about how huge this is and how important this is for health and relationships and happiness and career and all sorts of other things. But very briefly, I'm going to talk about how huge this is in your life to do with happiness. And we'll talk more about this again in the second half about happiness. But very briefly, this is huge for happiness. And the thing about focus is your mind is always focused somewhere. Always. It's always focused somewhere. Right now, for example, I am vain enough to hope that perhaps you're still focused on the class. But I know from research that almost all of you will have lost focus at various points so far. Your mind will have gone off somewhere and you'll be worrying about some email you need to send, something you need to do, check the news, go somewhere else. Your mind is going to drag you away from what I'm saying. And that's normal. Or it might have just been something I said that stimulated something. So I said, for example, your mind is always focused somewhere. And you go, huh, is that true? Is it always focused somewhere? What about when I'm daydreaming? Or what about when I'm actually dreaming and asleep? Is my mind focused somewhere? Or what about when I'm in the car and I'm singing to music on the radio and I'm also thinking about a problem? Is my mind still focused? Well, in short answer, yes. Your mind is always focused somewhere. But for example, in the car, it's like you've taken a photograph where everything's in focus. And your mind is flicking between each of those little things very, very rapidly, so that you are paying enough attention loosely to the driving, and you're able to pay attention to the radio, and you're able to think. But your mind is actually just flicking between these different points of focus. So anyway, so your mind is always focused somewhere. So it's always on some subject. And sometimes where it's focused is helpful for you. It's a good thing. But sometimes it's not. And as we develop this awareness of focus, as you develop this skill of being able to notice moment to moment, where is your focus? At any given moment during the day, you can notice, where am I focused? Am I focused on something that is going to help me right now? Or am I focused on something extremely unhelpful? And you know, and I know, because this is just part of the human mind, is that sometimes it's focused somewhere helpful, but often it's not. And as we develop this skill, you're developing two. One is the skill of the awareness of where your focus is. And the second skill you're developing in meditation is this ability to move it back to where you want it to be. And in meditation, we do that over and over and over and over. And that is a fantastic skill to develop. This ability to move our focus from where it is to where we want it to be. And there are really two aspects of this focus thing. There's the what are you focused on, but there's also the how are you focused on it. And what I mean by that is, what is really the subject? It's like, for example, you might be focused on the news. The how is, how are you looking at it? And this is, I don't know if you're familiar with sort of these filters that Instagram or Snapchat have, whereby you can just apply a filter to the photograph and it'll change how it looks. The photograph is still the same, but they change very clever things with the lighting. You can turn it black and white. You can put it into sepia. You can make it look more dramatic. You can what they call cool down the colors. I don't really know what that means, except it makes it look more blue. Or you can warm it up, which just makes it look more orange or something as far as I can tell. But anyway, so there are all these different filters you can apply to it, and it changes the texture and tone of the photograph. And that's true of your focus too. So you might be, for example, looking at the news, and goodness knows the news is pretty horrific. But there is always the option of how are you looking at it. So for example, one of the things that is true about the news, it's pretty horrific. You can look at the numbers of people who have contracted the virus, the number of people who are dead. You might have opinions and judgments about how we're dealing with it. So there are all these aspects of it that you can look at what's wrong about the current situation. And it's not that you're wrong to do so. There is plenty that is wrong with the current situation. But it's also true that it's possible to look at what is amazing about the situation. And so these are two different ways. We can look at what's wrong with the situation, or we can look at what's amazing about the situation. And what's amazing about the situation is the heroism of people on the front line, or of all of these people doing everything they can to try and keep our spirits up in terms of entertainers, free concerts, all the stuff that's being happening online, all the generosity that's been given, the huge amounts of charity and philanthropy that is being generated as a result of this. So There are horrific things going on, that is true, as a result of this. And there are amazing things going on. If you focus on one, make you miserable. If you focus on the other, it'll make you happy. There's a lot about the science of happiness, and we're going to look more about that in the second half of the science of happiness. But part of it is incredibly simple. If you focus on what's wrong, particularly with your life, if you focus on what's wrong with your life, you will be miserable. If you focus on what's right with your life, you will feel grateful and you will feel happy. Now, that isn't to say you should go around thinking about unicorns and rainbows all the time. You've got to be realistic. You've got to see what's wrong. But where is your mind most of the time? And does it go there automatically? Or do you have some ability to notice what you're focused on from moment to moment? And if you need to focus on what's wrong, focus on what's wrong. But are you focused there automatically or because you need to be? And can you move your attention to look at it? Either look at a different subject or look at the same subject in a different way. And these are the skills we're developing in meditation. And this is why focus is such an important building block of meditation.